Hello, my dear students. Welcome back to Sri Hari Ragavendra Academy. So today let us start with question number 5 on a flexible budget with some different adjustments. Okay. So before beginning the class, let us take a blessings of Hayagriva Swami. ज्ञानानन्दमयं देवं निर्मलास्फटिकाकृतिम् आधारं सर्वविद्यानां हयग्रीवमुपास्महे नमस्ते शारदा देवी काश्मीरपुरवासिनी विद्यारम्भं करिष्यामि सिद्धिर्भवतु मे सदा. Let the Lord Hayagriva Swami and Saraswati Devi bless all my student viewers with a good knowledge and success in their life. So yeah, let's begin the class, students. So draw a flexible budget for overhead expenses on the basis of following data. Determine the overhead rates at 70%, 80% and 90% capacity. Now we have a variable overhead, so indirect labor and stores, power and repairs, fixed overhead, depreciation, insurance and salary. Now the data is given for this 80% capacity, and for 70% capacity it is not given, and even for the 90% capacity it is not given. Now we have to prepare a flexible budget for 70% and 80% capacity. Now the first heading which we have is variable overhead. So we have indirect labor and store, so it should not be a problem. Now we have to be very careful in calculating this, because this 20,000 and this 2,000 has some classification here. So out of this 20,000, 60% is fixed, and out of this 2%, 60% is fixed. So what does it mean? The remaining 40% will be the variable cost in the both the cases. Okay. Now depreciation, insurance and salary, it's a fixed overhead, so it should not be a problem. 11,000, 3,000, 10,000, irrespective of operating at different capacity, fixed cost will remain same. Say for example, now you have to cook for 100 people, guys. So for that you have a go down. Getting my point? See, whether you cook for 70 people, whether you cook for 80 people, whether you cook for 90 people, or whether you cook for 100 people, you have to pay the go down rent. So which is a fixed cost. So what happened here is, irrespective of number of people that you are cooking for, rent become very fixed. That is a fixed cost. Similarly here, irrespective whether the company is operating at 70%, 80%, 90% capacity, fixed cost will remain fixed. Here, even here, power and repairs are 60% fixed. Even this remains fixed irrespective of number of capacity. Then what fluctuate? Fluctuation will come based on the capacity in terms of variable cost. So let us try to analyze all these things and solve the problem today. Okay, come, let's start the problem. I'll just draw lines here to make you people understand more clearly. Okay, now yes, now we'll start the problem. Yeah. Sherry. Solution. Problem number, I think it's 5. Flexible budget. Okay, this is the problem, guys. So let us start with the first question here, that is variable overhead, indirect labor of 12,000 rupees. Okay, so now I will start with Roman number 1, which is variable overhead. Under that first point is indirect labor. Look at here. Here we have variable overhead. First heading is at 80% capacity. What is the indirect labor? 12,000. So I will record it at 12,000. Now it's a very simple mechanism that we wanted to follow here, and I'll be explaining you that with this following examples. Okay. I'll just do a few working note calculations here so that you will come to know. So with terms of indirect labor, so we got to know that indirect labor for 80% capacity is 12,000. So we will write here, for 80% capacity the indirect labor cost is 12,000. Now for 70% capacity, what is a indirect labor? Just a cross multiplication. Therefore 70 into 12,000 units divided by 80 rupees. So you have to just calculate it, 70 into 12,000 divided by 80. So this will be 10,500 rupees. This is for what capacity? 70% capacity. This is point number 1. Now point number 2. Say for example, for 80% capacity, if you are manufacturing 12,000 units, then for 90% capacity, what is the number of indirect labor here? So again, it is a very simple cross multiplication. 90 into 12,000 divided by 80. So that will be 13,500. So we got to know indirect labor for 70% capacity is 10,500. So let us write it here as 10,500. Here for indirect labor for 90% capacity is 13,500. 13,500 is written. Now we shall start with the second adjustment, which is stores. Stores is given as 4,000 for 80% capacity, which I will write it here. Stores is 4,000. Okay. Now again, as usual, the same thing. For 80% capacity, if the store's cost is 4,000, then what is it for 70% and what is it for 90%? So again, we will calculate it here with the example. Say for example, this is stores. We will write it here. For 80% capacity, stores is 4,000 rupees. Then for 70%, what it is? So how do we calculate it? 70 into 4,000 units divided by 80. So this comes to 3,500 rupees. Now second one, for 80%, if stores is 4,000, then what it should be for 90%? How do we calculate it? 90 into 4,000 divided by 80, then it will be 4,500. So what does it mean? For 70% capacity, the store's cost is 3,500. For 90% capacity, store cost is 4,500. So let us record it here. 3,500 and 4,500. Done. Next, we will go for semi-variable overhead, that is Roman number 2. Roman number 2. Semi-variable overhead. What do we have in the semi-variable overhead? Power 60% fixed. So firstly, let us write it as power. So what is cost of power? Cost, we have to just again go with certain calculations here. So let me write it here. Out of this, now 20,000, 60% is a fixed cost and 40% will be of variable cost. So this is given for 80% of 80% units. Now let me calculate what is 20,000 of fixed cost. 20,000 into 60%. I think 12,000 rupees will be the fixed cost. So 12,000 for 80% is a fixed cost. But as I've already told, irrespective of number of capacity utilization or number of units produced, fixed cost remains fixed. Remember the example of cordon rent. Irrespective of number of people that you cook for, this becomes fixed, this becomes fixed. Now out of this 20,000, 60% fixed cost is 12,000 and remaining 8,000 will be your variable cost. How do we calculate it? 60,000 into 40%, then this is your variable cost 8,000. Similarly, just do a cross multiplications here with a very simple example. Say for example, for 80%, if your variable cost is 8,000, then for 70%, what is the new variable cost? So 70 into 8,000 divided by 80, then it will be 7,000. Similarly, for 90,000, it will be 9,000 units. So simple cross multiplication. So this is now done. Did you got to know how did we segregate it? First, I segregated the fixed cost. 20,000 into 60% of fixed cost, that came to 12,000. So 12,000 is for 80%, but this 12,000, as it is a fixed cost, it remains fixed irrespective of capacity utilization. Then out of 12,000, if out of 20,000, if 12,000 is fixed, remaining 8,000 is the variable cost for 80%. So then we have to calculate, if 80% consists a variable cost of 8,000, then what is a variable cost for 70% and what is a variable cost for 90%. This is done with the help of cross multiplication. Now similarly, we have one more expenses here, which is repairs. So I will just try to write it as repairs. So repairs is 2,000. Now again here we have 60% of fixed cost and 40% of variable cost. Now what is fixed? We will just try to understand. 2,000 into 60%, I think 1,200 will be the fixed cost. Now irrespective of number of capacity utilization, this remains constant, 1,200. Okay, now 2,000 into 40%. Now this is 800 is the variable cost for 80%. Okay, 2,000 into 40%, 800 will be the variable cost. Then what is the variable cost for 70%? Variable cost for 90% should be analyzed with the help of cross multiplication. Then that comes up to 700 and 900. Getting my point? This is the variable cost. Next we have a fixed overhead, which is Roman number 3. I will write it here, Roman number 3, which is fixed overhead. Under fixed overhead, no problems at all. Fixed is always fixed irrespective of the capacity utilization, depreciation, insurance and salaries. I will write one by one all three here. Depreciation, insurance and salaries. Now which is fixed, it is fixed for all the units. So I think depreciation is 11,000, 11,000 and 11,000. Insurance is 3,000, 3,000, 3,000. Salaries is 10,000, 10,000 and 10,000. So this is the entire problem, and finally we will calculate the total cost, which comes up to 58,900. Then it comes up to 62,000. Then it comes up to 65,100. This is how we calculated the entire problem solution number 5. So problem number 5. So variable overhead, semi-variable overhead and fixed overhead with the total cost. So thank you for watching the video. If you do have a doubt, you can put it in the comment, so I will be able to reply you in the comment as well. Thank you.